So taking a break from lecture and being in the ICPI installer course manual and going over things on how to install in pavers and things like that, we decided to go out into the gardens and work on a walkway that's being installed. So we started working on prepping that to put pavers in. And this is just a little area in the gardens that was once kind of just had some plants in it. It wasn't really anything, and now they're adding a walkway. So we're able to get some kind of hands-on experience working on that. So there's a variety of tools used when installing pavers. So one of the tools that we used was we call it a zip level, and it has a separate, there's the main box, and then it has a separate little device on it that you use to measure a level from one area to another. So you essentially get the little box, and it's attached to a yellow cord, which you'll see that we use. And you'll zero it out in one spot. You're supposed to set it in a spot that that is going to be stationary throughout the project, because it's important when installing pavers that you get the right slope, you get the right depth when digging, because if you don't do that, then the path is going to be all bumpy and things like that. So you want to make sure that you're level, and the best and most accurate way to do that is through either using lasers, which is there's a tool that uses lasers to measure elevation changes, or there's a zip level that we used, which is a little fancier, it's a little more accurate, and it's definitely way easier to use. So essentially you'd put it in a spot, there's a pole attached to it, and you would zero it out, and then you'd put it to where you're measuring from that spot, and then it would be able to tell you how many inches or feet it is from the spot you originated. So when doing installation, you would usually have base points along the side, and you will have markers, stakes that have maybe the elevation on it or the starting point, and then you would use those throughout the project on the sides to zero it out at the stake, and then measure down into the where you're installing the pavers. Some other tools we used was marking paint, and everyone has seen this. And there's a variety of brands that you can use, but it's just the bright orange paint that you can spray onto, grass or concrete or dirt or anywhere, and it kind of just marks where things are, where you're working. And so we kind of use that to mark where we'll be digging, and that stuff, it stays, but it also wears off with weather. The other tool we used was we call it a dingo, and it's just a little excavation machine. You can attach different parts to it to use. We use the bucket and then the tiller as well on it, and you'll see that I have a video at the end to show of us doing work, a time lapse, and you'll see us using that to till the ground and then switch the bucket, and then we would take the bucket and then we'll scoop the dirt out and move it. That's a huge help when installing pavers, because you don't want to dig the trench by hand. That's way too much work, and it's labor heavy. And so for larger jobs, you're supposed to use larger equipment, backhoes and things like that. But for this one, we're just using a simple little dingo to do the work for us. So the process we did is you would measure out where you want the path, and you would mark it off with the paint and with stakes and string if you wanted, and you would use the excavation tool to dig out the dirt in the soil. using the zip level, you'd want to measure how deep you go. And so we were going 9 inches. We calculated going down 9 inches, and then with the base material we're putting in, the road base, going up so many inches, then we would be able to put the pavers on top, and that would be a thick enough base for the pavers to be fine without settling or without eroding or things like that. So once you excavate it and you measure it properly, then you measure the width of the path. We were doing 6 feet width for the path, and that's just so there's enough room for people to walk, handicap accessible, things like that. What you would do is you would make sure the ground is fairly smooth. I mean, you could be very precise with a level and things like that, but just make sure it's smooth. Depending on the type of soil, the subgrade soil beneath where you're putting the pavers, you would want to compact the soil. So the compactor we were using was, it's a smaller one, so it's only about 3,000 to 4,000 IBF, or pounds of force that it was giving. So when using compacting equipment, the smaller the equipment, so the less pounds of force it can give off, the shallower it compacts. So when laying road base with a compactor like the one we're using, we don't want to lay more than like about 2 inches per layer that we're compacting. And this is because if we put all 6 to 8 inches of road base in at once and then use the compactor we were using, it would only compact probably the top layer, and then the other 6 inches or so would just remain uncompacted. And then we'd put the pavers on, and then over time gravity would work its magic, and it would settle, and then the pavers would sink and they wouldn't be level, and then water could get in and things like that, and then it would mess up the whole paver job, and then we'd have to go back and fix it. So with the ICPI suggests that when compacting, even with larger equipment that can maybe do 4 inches, several much higher pounds of force, that can do 4 inches or so, they suggest only compacting 2 to 4 inches at a time per layer, and that's just to make sure things are compact and that it's a firm base for the pavers. Before we load the road base or the base material into the trench that we're digging, we want to make sure we lay down some geotextile fabric. And this isn't like a planter bed fabric where it prevents weeds from coming through. This is woven fabric. It's made of it's woven together in a way that it makes it very strong, and it prevents water and other things from coming through. And we lay it underneath the base material because it doesn't strengthen the base, but it helps keep the base together. And we actually we'll put it on the bottom, and then we'll bring it up on the sides, and this helps kind of keep everything together. If there's water underneath in the soil, it keeps it from getting into the base. And then later on we'll talk about bedding sand, but if the bedding sand kind of leaks out of the joints of the pavers, then hopefully the geotextile fabric keeps it from spilling out even more into the soil, and then that will help maintain the integrity of the paver. So we lay that down, and the rolls come in a variety of sizes and prices. Usually a roll, they're kind of pricey, but we're using a 6-foot roll, and we laid it out, and we made sure it came up onto the sides so that it would encase the whole pavement, or the whole pathway, and then we're able to lay the road base on top of that. Some other equipment we used is a derby rake, or an asphalt rake. And that's used, it's different from like a garden rake because the teeth on it are in such a way that it doesn't filter out large clumps or like larger pieces of gravel. It's made more to just smooth it out, smooth the road base out. So after you make sure the subgrade base is set, like the natural soil is ready and level and everything, then you'd put the 2 inches of road base down, and then you'd smooth it out and try to get it as smooth as possible. And then you would come in with a compactor and you'd compact it down, and that would make it really hard. And you want to make sure that's a little moist, and so that the particles, because road base is made of a variety of different particles. It's well graded, and it's all gravel. It's all different sizes of gravel, and because of that, it's the edges of the particles of the road base is they're jagged, so they catch on each other, and then when they're compacted, they stick together really tight. And so having them wet, not like super wet, but having the road base wet when compacting it helps the particles kind of slide in and get into the little cracks and then compact really tight. And that road base alone compacted properly, it's harder than concrete. It will last a long time. Scientists and researchers have done their work, and they figure that it's the best way to create a solid foundation for pavers and for even like roads, sidewalks, highways, driveways, all those use this technique in order to make a solid foundation, so that even if underneath, the subgrade, the soil underneath kind of starts to settle in a road, it's going to be pretty set. So it can transport vehicles and people and stuff like that. So overall, that's kind of what we covered today. In class, we did that. We dug the trench, laid down the geotextile fabric, laid down road base, and then compacted it, at least the little section that we did. I do have a time lapse of us working, so I hope you enjoyed that, and thanks for watching.